The wind howled like a wounded animal across the frozen plains of West Texas, and Theresa Emerson knew with certainty that she would die if she did not find shelter within the hour. Her husband had been dead for 3 months now, buried in the hard ground back in Fort Stockton after a rattlesnake bite turned his leg black and took him from this world in a matter of days. She had sold their small property to pay his debts and bought passage on a stagecoach heading east to Louisiana where her sister lived. That decision seemed foolish now, as the December blizzard of 1878 transformed the landscape into an endless white nightmare. The stagecoach had lost a wheel 15 miles back, and the driver had unhitched one of the horses for her, telling her to ride north toward a ranch he thought might be nearby. He stayed with the other passengers, too old and too stubborn to make the journey on horseback. Theresa was 24 years old and had learned to ride as a child, but this storm tested every skill she possessed. The horse beneath her struggled through snowdrifts that reached its knees, and ice crystals stung her face like tiny knives. Her fingers had gone numb inside her gloves an hour ago, and she could no longer feel her feet in the stirrups. The world had become nothing but white and gray, earth and sky blending into one frozen hell. She almost missed the fence post. It appeared like a ghost through the swirling snow, weathered wood marking the boundary of someone's property. Theresa urged her horse along the fence line, praying it would lead to a house, a barn, anything that could shield her from the deadly wind. Her prayers were answered when the dark shape of a building emerged from the whiteness. It was a ranch house, sturdy and well-built, with smoke rising from the chimney. Relief flooded through her, giving her the strength to dismount. She stumbled through the snow to the front door and pounded on it with fists she could barely feel. The door opened almost immediately, and she found herself looking up at a tall man with dark hair and eyes the color of strong coffee. "Please," she managed to say through chattering teeth. "My stage broke down. I will freeze." The man did not hesitate. He pulled her inside with one strong hand and called out over his shoulder, "Jacob, there is a horse outside. Get it to the barn quickly." A younger man appeared from another room, grabbed a coat from a hook by the door, and rushed past them into the storm. The tall man guided Theresa to a chair near the fireplace and began removing her ice-covered cloak. "We need to warm you slowly," he said, his voice deep and surprisingly gentle. "Too fast and it will cause damage. Can you tell me your name?" "Theresa Emerson," she said, her words slurring slightly. "Widow from Fort Stockton." He knelt before her and carefully removed her gloves, examining her fingers with a practiced eye. "I am Grant Kelley. This is my ranch." "You are safe here, Mrs. Emerson." She tried to focus on his face, but exhaustion and cold made everything blur. "The others, the stagecoach, they are still out there." "Where?" Grant asked, already moving toward the door. 15 miles south, maybe more. The driver stayed with them." Grant's jaw tightened. He stood and walked to the door, waiting until the younger man returned from the barn, shaking snow from his coat. "Jacob, ride to the Morrison place and get Thomas and his sons. There is a stagecoach stranded south of here with passengers. We need to bring them in before they freeze." Jacob nodded and left without complaint. Grant returned to Theresa, bringing a thick blanket which he wrapped around her shoulders. He disappeared into the kitchen and came back with a cup of weak, lukewarm tea. "Drink this slowly," he instructed. "Not too much at once." Theresa took the cup with shaking hands, grateful when he steadied it for her. The tea tasted like heaven, warming her from the inside. She studied him as she drank, noticing the lines around his eyes that suggested he was in his early 30s, the capable hands, the way he moved with quiet confidence through his home. "How long has this storm been going?" she asked. "Started early this morning." The sky looked angry yesterday, but I hoped it would pass over. Should have known better. He sat down across from her, his long legs stretched out toward the fire. December storms in West Texas can be killers. You were lucky to find this place. The driver told me to ride north. He said there might be a ranch. Old Charlie, probably. He has been driving that route for years, knows this land. Grant paused. Your husband, how long ago did you lose him? 3 months. We had only been married 2 years. Theresa felt the familiar ache in her chest but pushed it away. She had cried enough tears for Robert Emerson. I was traveling to my sister's home in Louisiana, starting over. Grant nodded, asking no more questions. They sat in silence as the fire crackled and the wind screamed outside. Feeling gradually returned to Theresa's extremities, bringing with it a painful, tingling sensation. She gritted her teeth against the discomfort, refusing to complain. This man had saved her life. The least she could do was bear the consequences of her own foolishness with dignity. Hours passed before the rescue party returned. They brought with them the stagecoach driver, 2 elderly women, a middle-aged merchant, and a young couple with a small child. Grant's ranch house quickly transformed into a makeshift refuge. He and Jacob moved efficiently, settling people near the fire, preparing food, finding blankets and dry clothes. Theresa helped where she could, her strength returning as warmth seeped back into her bones. She assisted the older women in changing into dry garments in one of the bedrooms and helped prepare coffee for the half-frozen men. The house was not large, but it was well organized and clean. She noticed small touches that spoke of care: curtains in the windows, a shelf of books, a photograph on the mantel showing a family of 4. As night fell, Grant worked with the Morrison men to prepare sleeping arrangements. The 2 elderly women would share the main bedroom. The young family would take the smaller bedroom. Everyone else would sleep in the main room near the fire. It was crowded but warm, and no one complained. Theresa found herself seated at the kitchen table, helping to slice bread for the evening meal. Grant worked beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. She noticed he had a slight scar on his right hand, running from his thumb to his wrist. "How did you get that?" she asked, then immediately regretted her boldness. "I apologize. That was forward of me." Grant glanced at his hand and smiled slightly. It was the first real expression she had seen on his face beyond concern and concentration. "Barbed wire accident when I was 19. Stupid mistake. I learned to be more careful after that. You have lived here long." "Built this place 7 years ago. Worked for other ranchers before that, saved every penny." He set down the knife and looked at her directly. "I have been waiting for something, or maybe someone, never been quite sure which." The statement hung in the air between them, strange and intimate. Theresa felt her cheeks warm and looked down at the bread. "That is an odd thing to say to a stranger. Maybe, but this is an odd night." He picked up the knife again and resumed cutting. "You feel it too, I can tell." She wanted to deny it, but something stopped her. There was a quality to this man, to this moment, that felt significant. Like standing at a crossroads and seeing all possible futures spreading out before her. Instead of answering, she changed the subject. "Is Jacob your brother, cousin? His parents died of fever when he was 15. He has been with me ever since. He is 20 now, good with horses, better with cattle than I am." They finished preparing the meal in comfortable silence. As they fed their unexpected guests, Theresa observed the easy way Grant commanded respect. The Morrison men deferred to him. Jacob anticipated his needs, and even the stranded passengers seemed to relax under his calm authority. This was a man who had built something meaningful in the harsh Texas wilderness, who took responsibility seriously, who did not shirk from difficult work. The The storm continued to rage through the night. Theresa lay on a pallet near the fire, listening to the wind and the breathing of the other sleepers. She could see Grant across the room, sitting up in a chair, keeping watch to ensure the fire did not die and that everyone remained warm. He had given up his bed without hesitation, had opened his home to strangers, had risked his own safety to rescue them. What kind of man did such things? She thought of Robert, her dead husband. He had been a good man in his way, but restless and prone to schemes that never quite worked out. They had married more out of convenience than passion. Her parents were dead, she needed security, and he needed a wife to make him look respectable to potential business partners. There had been affection between them, but not love. Not really. Looking at Grant Kelley in the firelight, Theresa felt something stir inside her that she had never experienced with Robert. It frightened and thrilled her in equal measure. The storm blew itself out by morning, leaving behind a world transformed by snow. The landscape glittered under a weak winter sun, beautiful and treacherous. Grant and Jacob spent the day digging paths to the barn and checking on the livestock. The Morrison men returned to their own ranch, promising to come back in a few days when the roads were clearer to help transport the passengers to Fort Stockton. The older women, whose names were Martha and Louise, took over the kitchen with good-natured efficiency. The young couple, Daniel and Sarah Hayes, entertained their 3-year-old son near the fire. The merchant, a man named Peterson, spent most of his time sleeping, exhausted from the ordeal. The stage-coach driver, who was indeed called Charlie, had injured his leg during the rescue and sat in a chair, directing everyone with cheerful authority. Theresa found herself drawn outside, needing air and space after the crowded night. She wrapped herself in her now dry cloak and walked carefully through the snow toward the barn. The sun felt wonderful on her face despite the cold, and the air smelled clean and sharp. She found Grant inside the barn, tending to the horses. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression made her heart skip. "Should you be out in this cold?" he asked. "I needed to move, to think." She approached slowly, watching him work. His hands moved with surety and gentleness as he checked each animal. "I wanted to thank you properly. You saved my life. Anyone would have done the same." "No, not anyone." She stood beside him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. "You are a remarkable man, Grant Kelley." He turned to face her fully, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "I meant what I said last night. I have been waiting for someone like you. I know it sounds crazy, we have barely spoken, but I know." "How can you know?" she whispered. "The same way you know that your marriage was not what it should have been. The same way you know that coming here was not an accident." He reached out and gently touched her cheek. "I am 33 years old, Theresa. I have worked hard, built a good life, but it has been empty. Then you appear in the middle of a blizzard, and suddenly everything makes sense." She should pull away. She should tell him he was being foolish, that grief and shock were making her vulnerable to romantic notions. But she did none of those things. Instead, she leaned into his touch and admitted the truth. "I feel it too. I do not understand it, but I feel it." He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his serious face into something almost boyish. "Then we will figure it out together. There is no rush. You are trapped here by the storm and circumstance. We have time." Time. Such a strange concept. 3 days ago she had all the time in the world stretching empty before her. Now, standing in this barn with this man, time felt precious and full of possibility. They walked back to the house together, not touching but close enough that their shoulders nearly brushed. Inside, Martha and Louise had prepared a substantial breakfast, and the house smelled of coffee and frying bacon. Everyone gathered around the table, squeezing together, sharing food and beginning to share stories. Charlie, the driver, told tales of his years on the road, painting vivid pictures of the changing West. Peterson, the merchant, spoke of his travels, of cities back east that seemed like another world. Daniel and Sarah talked about their hopes of starting a farm, of building something for their son. The older women reminisced about their youth, about husbands long dead and children scattered across the country. When it was Theresa's turn, she found herself speaking honestly about her marriage, about Robert's dreams and failures, about the loneliness of being with someone and still feeling alone. She saw Grant listening intently, and she saw understanding in his eyes. Later, when the dishes were washed and the day stretched long and quiet, Grant asked her to walk with him again. They bundled up and headed out into the sparkling white world. He showed her the boundaries of his property, explained his plans for expansion, talked about the cattle he raised and the horses he bred. "I always wanted a partner," he said as they stood looking out over snow-covered pastures. "Not just a wife to keep house and bear children, though I want those things too, but a real partner, someone to build this life with, someone who understands that ranching is hard work but rewarding, someone who is not afraid of challenges." "Is that what you see in me?" Theresa asked. "After knowing me for one day, I see strength. I see intelligence. I see someone who rode through a blizzard instead of giving up and dying. I see someone who helps without being asked, who treats strangers with kindness." He turned to look at her. "I see someone I could love for the rest of my life." The declaration should have seemed absurd. They had known each other for barely 24 hours. But standing there in the snow, with the Texas sun shining weak and cold above them, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "I am still in mourning," she said softly. "People will talk. People always talk. Let them." He took her gloved hand in his. "I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I am asking you to consider staying, to give this a chance, to see if what we both feel right now can grow into something lasting." Theresa looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. She saw hope there, and vulnerability, and the same strange certainty that she felt in her own heart. "I was supposed to go to Louisiana. My sister is expecting me." "Write to her. Explain. If she loves you, she will understand. You make it sound so simple." "Maybe it is. Maybe we complicate things by thinking too much." He squeezed her hand gently. "Stay for a week. Stay until the roads are clear and you can make a real choice. If you still want to go to Louisiana, then I will drive you to Fort Stockton myself and buy your ticket." She knew she should say no. She knew this was reckless and impulsive and completely unlike her usual careful nature. But her careful nature had led her to a loveless marriage and a life of quiet desperation. Maybe it was time to be reckless. "1 week," she agreed. "And then I will decide." The smile he gave her was worth every risk. The days that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. The house remained full of stranded travelers, but the atmosphere was surprisingly pleasant. Everyone contributed what they could. Martha and Louise cooked. Charlie, despite his injured leg, repaired things around the house that had been neglected. Peterson helped Jacob with the animals, discovering a previously unknown affinity for ranch work. Daniel and Sarah kept their son entertained and helped wherever else they were needed. And Theresa found herself working alongside Grant, learning the rhythms of his life. She helped him feed the cattle, trudging through snow that grew a bit shallower each day. She learned to check water troughs for ice, to recognize when a cow was in distress, to handle the chickens that lived in a sheltered coop behind the house. In the evenings, they all gathered by the fire. Grant brought out a fiddle that had belonged to his father and played simple tunes while Charlie sang in a surprisingly good voice. The older women taught Sarah how to knit, and little Thomas Hayes learned to build elaborate structures with wooden blocks that Grant carved for him during the quiet hours. On the third night, when everyone else had fallen asleep, Theresa and Grant sat together by the dying fire. He told her about his childhood in Missouri, about coming west as a young man seeking opportunity, about the backbreaking work of building a ranch from nothing. "Why alone?" she asked. "Why did you never marry?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I almost did once, when I was 25. Her name was Catherine. She was beautiful and sweet, and her father owned the ranch where I worked. We courted for 6 months, and I thought I loved her. But when I told her I wanted to start my own place, she refused to come with me. She wanted comfort and established society, not struggle and uncertainty. We parted ways, and she married the son of another rancher within the year. Did it break your heart? I thought it did. But looking back, I think it bruised my pride more than anything else. If I had truly loved her, I would have stayed, or she would have come. Real love does not give up so easily." He looked at her with those dark, serious eyes. "I think I have been waiting all this time for the right person, for you." Theresa felt tears prick her eyes. "You barely know me, Grant. What if I am not who you think I am? What if I disappoint you? What if you do not? What if this is exactly what we both need?" He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle. "I am not a romantic man, Theresa. I do not believe in fairy tales or love at first sight. But I believe in recognizing opportunity when it appears. I believe in instinct and trust, and everything in me says you are meant to be here. Even though I am still wearing black, even though my husband has been dead less than 4 months, you wore black for propriety, not grief. You told me yourself your marriage was not a love match." He took her hand, holding it carefully. "I would never dishonor your husband's memory, but I will not pretend to mourn something that did not exist. You deserve happiness, Theresa. You deserve to be loved the way you should have been loved all along." She wanted to kiss him then, wanted to close the distance between them and feel his lips on hers. But it was too soon, too fast, despite the intensity of what she felt. Instead, she rested her head on his shoulder, and they sat together in comfortable silence until the fire burned down to embers. On the 4th day, the Morrison men returned with a large sleigh. The roads were still difficult but passable with care. They announced that they could transport the stranded passengers back to Fort Stockton the following morning. The news brought mixed reactions. Everyone was grateful for Grant's hospitality, but the house had become a small community, and there was sadness in the thought of parting. That evening, Martha pulled Theresa aside in the kitchen. The older woman had keen blue eyes that missed nothing. "You are thinking of staying," she said. It was not a question. Theresa did not bother denying it. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone paying attention. The way you look at him. The way he looks at you." Martha smiled. "My Harold has been gone 15 years, but I remember what it felt like when we first met, like someone had lit a lamp inside my chest. That is what I see when you and Grant are together. People will judge me. A widow, barely out of mourning, staying at a bachelor's ranch. People will judge you no matter what you do. Might as well give them something good to talk about." Martha patted her hand. "You have a chance at happiness here, real happiness. Do not throw it away because of what narrow-minded fools might think." That night, Theresa lay awake long after everyone else had fallen asleep. She thought about her sister in Louisiana, waiting for her arrival. She thought about Robert, buried in Fort Stockton Cemetery. She thought about the life she had planned, safe and predictable, living with her sister and perhaps eventually finding work as a seamstress or teacher. Then she thought about Grant, about the way his face softened when he smiled, about his strength and gentleness, his quiet competence, the way he made her feel seen and valued. She thought about the ranch, about the work and challenges and rewards it offered. She thought about building something meaningful, about partnership and purpose. The choice was not really a choice at all. In the morning, as everyone prepared to leave, Theresa found Grant in the barn. He was saddling a horse, preparing to ride with the group to town. "I need to speak with you," she said. He turned immediately, reading something in her expression. "What is it?" "I am not going to Louisiana." The words came out steady and sure. "If your offer still stands, I would like to stay. I would like to see if this can become what we both hope it might be." The joy that flooded his face was answer enough, but he spoke anyway. "The offer stands. It will always stand." He crossed the space between them and took both her hands in his. "I will court you properly. I will give you time to be sure. We will do this right. How will we manage the propriety of it? People will talk. Let me handle that." He squeezed her hands and released them. "Trust me." When the sleigh departed an hour later, Theresa stood beside Grant, waving goodbye to the people who had shared their strange, storm-bound days. Charlie winked at her as he left. Martha and Louise both hugged her tight and whispered blessings. Even Peterson and the young family seemed to understand what was happening, offering congratulations and best wishes. After they had gone and the ranch settled into quiet, Grant took Theresa back inside. Jacob appeared from the barn, and Grant called him to join them at the kitchen table. "Jacob, I need your help with something important," Grant said seriously. "Mrs. Emerson has agreed to stay and allow me to court her, but we need to maintain proper appearances. I am going to ride into Fort Stockton today and speak with Reverend Walsh and his wife. I am going to ask Mrs. Walsh if she would be willing to come stay here as a chaperone until Theresa and I are married." Jacob's face broke into a wide grin. "About time you found someone. Mrs. Walsh is a good woman. She will do it. While I am gone, I need you to move my things into the small bedroom. Mrs. Emerson will have the main bedroom. We will conduct this courtship with absolute propriety so that no one can say anything against her character." Theresa felt warmth spread through her chest. He was thinking of her reputation, protecting her from gossip, doing everything the right way even though it meant inconvenience for himself. This was a man of honor. Grant left for town within the hour, taking one of the horses and promising to return before nightfall. Theresa spent the day with Jacob, learning more about the ranch and its operation. The young man was friendly and open, clearly delighted by the prospect of Grant finding happiness. "He has been alone too long," Jacob said as they worked together to repair a section of fence near the barn. "He is a good man, my cousin, the best I know. But this place needs more than just the two of us. It needs a family. Do you think he will mind that I do not know much about ranching? I grew up in town. My father was a clerk. You will learn. You already are learning." And Grant does not expect perfection. He just wants someone who is willing to try, who is not afraid of hard work. Jacob hammered a nail into place. "Besides, you make him happy. I have not seen him smile so much in years. That is worth more than any amount of experience." Grant returned as the sun was setting, accompanied by a plump, gray-haired woman riding side saddle on a gentle mare. Mrs. Walsh was in her late 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She greeted Theresa warmly and immediately began settling herself into the house. "Reverend Walsh and I discussed it thoroughly," she announced as Grant carried her bags inside. "We agree this is a practical arrangement. You are a widow, Mr. Kelley is a respected member of the community, and courtship requires supervision. I am happy to provide that supervision. Besides, the Reverend snores something terrible. A few weeks of peaceful sleep will do me good." Her matter-of-fact tone broke the tension, and Theresa found herself laughing. Mrs. Walsh winked at her and began inspecting the kitchen with the eye of an experienced housekeeper. That evening, with Mrs. Walsh established in the small bedroom and propriety firmly maintained, Grant and Theresa sat together in the main room. Jacob had tactfully retired to the bunkhouse he usually shared with seasonal workers, giving them privacy while Mrs. Walsh dozed in a rocking chair nearby, serving as a perfectly proper chaperone. "Thank you for doing all this," Theresa said quietly, "for protecting my reputation." "I am protecting our future," Grant replied. "When we marry, I want no shadow over it, no gossip, no doubts. I want everyone to know that we did this the right way." "When we marry," she repeated softly. "You are very confident." "I am. Are you not?" She thought about it honestly. "Yes, I am. It seems impossible after such a short time, but I am certain. Being with you feels right in a way nothing else ever has." He reached out and took her hand, a gesture that was becoming familiar and precious. "I will make you happy, Theresa. I swear it. I will work every day to be the husband you deserve. And I will work to be the wife you need. A true partner." They sat together, hands joined, as the fire crackled and Mrs. Walsh's gentle snoring provided a rhythmic backdrop. Outside, the snow-covered ranch spread quiet under the stars. Inside, two people who had been alone began to build something together. The courtship that followed was unlike anything Theresa had experienced. Grant courted her with quiet intensity, finding small ways each day to show his care. He brought her coffee in the morning exactly how she liked it. He taught her to ride better, patiently correcting her seat and hand position. He listened when she talked about her dreams and fears, really listened, asking thoughtful questions and remembering every detail. Mrs. Walsh proved to be an excellent chaperone and an even better friend. She had a dry sense of humor and decades of wisdom. She taught Theresa ranch recipes designed to feed hungry men efficiently. She shared stories of her own courtship and marriage, painting a picture of love that weathered difficulties through commitment and humor. "The key to a good marriage," she said one afternoon as they kneaded bread dough together, "is respect. Passion fades and returns, circumstances change, but respect endures. Mr. Kelley respects you. I see it in how he speaks to you, how he considers your opinions. That is a firm foundation." 2 weeks into the courtship, Grant took Theresa into Fort Stockton to meet the community properly. She wore one of her better dresses, dark blue rather than black, a small step away from widow's weeds. Grant introduced her to shopkeepers and ranchers, to the reverend and the doctor, to everyone who mattered in the small town. Some people looked at her with curiosity. A few women whispered behind their hands. But most were kind, welcoming her with the understanding that in the West, where life was hard and uncertain, people grasped happiness when they found it. They visited Robert's grave. Theresa had insisted on it, needing to make peace with the past before fully embracing the future. She stood looking at the simple wooden marker while Grant waited a respectful distance away. "I am sorry I could not love you the way you deserved," she whispered to the cold ground. "I hope you have found peace. I hope you would understand that I need to move forward now to find happiness where I can. Thank you for the kindness you did show me. I will remember it." She felt no guilt as she walked back to Grant. Robert had been a good man in his limited way, but he was gone, and she was alive. She had every right to embrace that life fully. On the ride back to the ranch, Grant was quieter than usual. Finally, he spoke. "That was a hard thing you did, saying goodbye. It needed to be done. I needed closure." She looked at him, at his strong profile and capable hands holding the reins. "I am ready now, Grant, truly ready. Whenever you want to set a date, I am willing." He turned to meet her eyes, and the emotion in his face took her breath away. "Spring," he said. "When the snow melts and the wildflowers bloom, I want to marry you surrounded by new life and color and warmth." I want our marriage to start with hope and beauty." "Spring," she agreed, her heart full. "I can wait until spring." But Grant apparently could not wait for everything. That evening, after Mrs. Walsh had retired to her room, he asked Theresa to walk with him despite the cold. They bundled up and stepped out into the clear night. The stars overhead blazed with impossible brightness, and the frozen world around them seemed to glow with reflected starlight. Grant led her away from the house to a small rise that overlooked the ranch. He stopped there and turned to face her, taking both her hands. "I know we have agreed to wait until spring to marry," he said, "but I cannot wait any longer to tell you that I love you. I love your strength and your kindness. I love your laugh and the way you concentrate when you are learning something new. I love how you are not afraid of hard work or new challenges. I love everything about you, Theresa Emerson, and I will love you until the day I die." Tears froze on her cheeks as she looked up at him. "I love you too. I did not think I could feel this way. I did not know love could be like this, so certain and strong and right. You have given me a future I never dreamed possible." He pulled her close, and she went willingly into his arms. They stood there holding each other under the vast Texas sky, two people who had found each other against impossible odds, who had recognized in each other the answer to questions they had been asking for years. When he finally kissed her, it was gentle and reverent and full of promise. Theresa felt the last pieces of her old life fall away. She was no longer the lonely girl who had married for security, no longer the grieving widow traveling to an uncertain future. She was simply herself, held by a man who loved her, standing on land that would become her home, looking toward a future bright with possibility. They walked back to the house hand in hand, and if Mrs. Walsh noticed Theresa's tear-stained face and glowing smile, she was kind enough not to comment. The winter slowly released its grip on the land. January turned to February, and the snow began to melt in earnest. The ranch burst into activity as calving season approached. Theresa learned to help with the births, overcoming her initial squeamishness to become genuinely useful. She discovered she had a talent for spotting problems early, for noticing when a cow was in distress before it became critical. Grant watched her with obvious pride and growing love. Their courtship deepened, moving beyond initial attraction to genuine partnership. They talked about everything: how to expand the ranch, what crops to plant in the kitchen garden, whether to invest in more horses or focus on cattle. Grant valued her opinions, often implementing her suggestions, showing her through actions that he meant what he said about wanting a true partner. Mrs. Walsh stayed through February, declaring she had never had such a pleasant winter. When she finally returned to town in early March, she hugged Theresa tight and whispered, "You have done well, my dear. He is a good man and you are a good woman. You will build a fine life together." With Mrs. Walsh gone, propriety dictated that Theresa move to town until the wedding. Grant arranged for her to stay with a widow named Mrs. Chen who ran a boarding house. It was proper and respectable, and Theresa hated every moment of being away from the ranch. But the separation made the time pass faster somehow. She spent her days in town helping Mrs. Chen and preparing for the wedding. The Chinese woman was a skilled seamstress and helped Theresa alter one of her good dresses into something suitable for a bride. It would not be white. Propriety still required some nod to her widowhood, but they chose a beautiful dove-gray silk that made Theresa's eyes look luminous. Grant came to town every few days, always chaperoned by Jacob or one of the other ranchers, always proper and correct. But his eyes told her everything she needed to know. He counted the days as eagerly as she did. They set the date for the first Saturday in April, when the Reverend assured them the weather should be mild and the wildflowers would be at their peak. Invitations were unnecessary in a small town like Fort Stockton. Word spread, and people understood they were welcome to attend. The week before the wedding, Theresa's sister, Elizabeth, arrived from Louisiana. She had written several times over the winter, her letters progressing from confusion to concern to cautious support. Meeting Grant in person completed her conversion to enthusiastic approval. "He is wonderful," Elizabeth told Theresa the night before the wedding as they prepared for bed in Mrs. Chen's boarding house. "Serious and kind and so obviously in love with you. I was worried when you wrote about staying at his ranch, worried you were making a terrible mistake. But seeing you together, I understand. This is right." Theresa hugged her sister tight. Elizabeth was 28, 4 years older, and had always been protective. Her blessing meant everything. "I wish you could stay longer," Theresa said. "I hate that you have to go back so soon. I have responsibilities in Louisiana. My students are waiting. But I will visit next winter, I promise. And you must write me every week telling me everything." "I will, I promise." The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful. True to Grant's prediction, wildflowers had erupted across the landscape, turning the harsh West Texas plains into a carpet of color. Purple verbena, yellow primrose, red paintbrush, and white prickly poppies created a natural cathedral more beautiful than anything man could build. The ceremony took place at the small church in Fort Stockton. Theresa wore her gray silk dress with wildflowers in her hair, gathered that morning by Jacob and woven into a crown by Mrs. Walsh. Grant wore his best suit, dark and well-fitted, and when Theresa entered the church on her sister's arm, the look on his face made her forget to breathe. Reverend Walsh kept the ceremony simple and heartfelt. They exchanged vows in strong, clear voices, promising to love and honor each other, to be partners in all things, to build a life together based on mutual respect and affection. When Grant slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, Theresa felt the last shadows of her old life dissolve. She was beginning again, truly beginning, and it was glorious. The kiss Grant gave her was chaste enough for public consumption, but held the promise of passion to come. Theresa felt heat rise in her cheeks as they turned to face the congregation as husband and wife. The people of Fort Stockton cheered and applauded, genuinely happy for the couple. The celebration afterward took place at the ranch. Grant and Jacob had spent days preparing, cleaning every surface, arranging borrowed tables and chairs, preparing food with help from several neighbor women. The house and surrounding yard filled with people, music, laughter, and joy. Theresa moved through the crowd in a happy daze, accepting congratulations, introducing her sister to neighbors, feeling Grant's presence like a steady anchor beside her. He rarely left her side, his hand frequently finding the small of her back, his eyes seeking hers across rooms. As evening fell and the guests began to depart, Jacob took Elizabeth back to town where she would spend one more night before catching the eastbound stage. Other guests filtered away until finally, Grant and Theresa stood alone in their house. Their house. Their life. Their future. Grant turned to her and the intensity in his eyes made her tremble. "Finally," he said softly, "I have you all to myself." He crossed the room and took her hands, raising them to his lips. "I am your husband now. You are my wife. Do you know how long I have waited to say those words? As long as I have waited to hear them." He drew her close, and this kiss was nothing like the chaste peck in church. This was hunger and promise and barely restrained passion. Theresa melted into it, into him, giving herself over to feelings she had never experienced with such intensity. Grant swept her into his arms and carried her to the bedroom, their bedroom now, kicking the door shut behind them. What followed was tender and passionate, fumbling and perfect, a joining that went beyond physical pleasure to something approaching transcendent. Grant was patient and attentive, making sure she found her own pleasure before seeking his release. Afterward, they lay tangled together, hearts racing, skin damp with sweat despite the cool spring air. "I love you," Grant whispered against her hair. "My wife, my partner, my everything." "I love you," Theresa replied, her hand over his heart feeling its steady beat. "My husband." They made love again during the night, slower this time, learning each other's bodies, discovering what brought pleasure and joy. By morning, Theresa felt transformed, claimed and claiming in equal measure. She was no longer the frightened widow who had stumbled through a blizzard seeking shelter. She was Grant Kelley's wife, partner in a ranch and a life, and she had never been happier. The days and weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that felt both new and eternal. Theresa threw herself into ranch life with enthusiasm. She learned to can and preserve food for the winter. She took over the vegetable garden, coaxing impressive yields from the stubborn Texas soil. She worked alongside Grant during branding season, her hands growing calloused, her skin tanning despite her best efforts to stay out of the sun. Jacob continued to live in the bunkhouse, giving the newlyweds privacy. But he joined them for meals, and the three of them became a tight unit, working together to expand and improve the ranch. They added more cattle, improved the breeding stock of their horses, and began planning an addition to the house. Summer came with brutal heat. Theresa learned to work early in the mornings and late in the evenings, resting during the worst of the midday sun. She discovered she was stronger than she had ever imagined, capable of enduring hardship and finding joy in small victories. In August, she realized she had missed her monthly courses twice. She waited another month to be certain before telling Grant. She chose her moment carefully, waiting until they were alone after supper, sitting together on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and red. "I have something to tell you," she said, taking his hand. "Something important." He turned to her immediately, concern crossing his face. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. Everything is right." She smiled, feeling tears of joy prick her eyes. "We are going to have a baby, Grant, in the spring." The expression that crossed his face was pure wonder. He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she had suddenly become fragile. "A baby. We are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" she asked, though his reaction made the question unnecessary. Happy does not begin to cover it. "I am terrified and thrilled and grateful and overwhelmed." He pulled back to look at her face, his hands framing her cheeks. "You have given me everything, Theresa. A home, a partnership, a future, and now this. I do not have words for what I feel." They sat together as darkness fell, making plans and sharing dreams. Grant was adamant that Theresa not overwork herself. She laughed at his sudden protectiveness, but agreed to be more careful. They decided to add another bedroom to the house before the baby arrived. They discussed names and wondered whether they would have a son or daughter. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Theresa felt sick some mornings but generally remained healthy and strong. Her body changed, rounding with new life, and Grant looked at her with such reverence that it made her blush. He was endlessly solicitous, bringing her water, insisting she rest, worrying over every twinge and ache. Jacob was delighted by the news, immediately beginning work on a cradle in his spare time. He carved it from oak, spending hours making sure every surface was smooth and safe. Watching him work, seeing his care and dedication, Theresa felt grateful for the family they had built together. Winter came again, marking nearly a year since Theresa had first arrived at the ranch. On a cold December evening, as they sat by the fire much as they had that first night, she reflected on how much had changed. "What are you thinking?" Grant asked, noticing her contemplative expression. That 1 year ago I was lost and scared, riding through a blizzard thinking I would die. And now I am here with you, warm and safe and carrying our child. Life is strange and wonderful. That blizzard brought you to me. I will never curse winter storms again. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had gone to Louisiana instead of staying? No, because you did not. You stayed, and we built this together. He put his hand on her swollen belly, feeling the baby kick. We are exactly where we are supposed to be. Their son was born on a warm April evening, almost exactly a year after their wedding. The doctor from Fort Stockton attended, along with Mrs. Walsh and a midwife. The labor was long and difficult, and Grant paced outside the bedroom door like a caged animal until Mrs. Walsh took pity and let him inside. He held Theresa's hand through the final pushes, murmuring encouragement and love. When the baby emerged, red-faced and screaming, Grant wept openly. They named him Thomas Robert Kelley, after Grant's father and Theresa's first husband, a nod to the past even as they embraced the future. Thomas was a healthy baby with his father's dark hair and his mother's gray eyes. He nursed well and slept in the beautiful cradle Jacob had made. Grant was besotted, spending hours simply watching his son sleep, marveling at tiny fingers and perfect toes. Life with a baby was exhausting and wonderful. Theresa learned to function on little sleep, to nurse while cooking, to soothe crying while managing ranch accounts. Grant helped whenever he could, walking the floor with Thomas when he was fussy, changing nappies without complaint, singing lullabies in his deep voice. Jacob proved to be an excellent uncle, entertaining Thomas with silly faces and patient play. The bunkhouse had gained 2 more permanent workers as the ranch expanded, young men who treated Thomas with gentle respect and often competed to hold him during meal breaks. When Thomas was 6 months old, Elizabeth came for her promised visit. She stayed for 2 weeks, enchanting everyone with her quick wit and warm personality. She and Jacob struck up an immediate friendship that seemed to surprise them both. Theresa watched with interest as they sought each other's company, talking for hours about books and ideas and dreams. "Do not get any ideas," Elizabeth warned her sister one evening as they bathed Thomas together. "I have a life in Louisiana. I am not getting any ideas. I am simply observing that you and Jacob seem to enjoy each other's company very much." "He is wonderful," Elizabeth admitted. "Kind and smart and funny, but I am too old for him. I am 29, he is 21. Age is just a number. What matters is how you feel." Elizabeth was quiet for a moment, concentrating on Thomas's wiggling feet. "He has asked me to consider moving here, to teach at the school in Fort Stockton. They need a teacher apparently." Theresa's heart leaped with hope. "And what did you say?" "That I would think about it." By the time Elizabeth left, she and Jacob had an understanding. He would write to her, and she would seriously consider the position in Fort Stockton. If she decided to come, they would pursue a proper courtship. Watching the stage carry her sister away, Theresa hoped with all her heart that Elizabeth would choose love and adventure over safety and familiarity. Her hope was rewarded when Elizabeth arrived in the fall with all her possessions, ready to begin teaching and to explore her feelings for Jacob. The courtship was sweet and proper, chaperoned by Theresa and Grant. By Christmas, they were engaged. They married the following spring in the same church where Grant and Theresa had wed, and Jacob built a small house on the far edge of the ranch property where he and Elizabeth could start their own life. Thomas grew from baby to toddler, walking and talking and getting into everything. He had his father's serious nature and his mother's determination, a combination that often left his parents exhausted and amused in equal measure. When Thomas was 2, Theresa discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier somehow, perhaps because she knew what to expect. She continued working on the ranch almost until the day she delivered, pausing only when Grant physically took the work from her hands and ordered her to rest. Their daughter arrived on a cool October evening, coming so quickly that there was barely time to fetch the midwife. Grant delivered his own daughter with shaking hands and overwhelming love. They named her Sarah Grace, and she was tiny and perfect with wispy blonde hair and her father's dark eyes. Life with two children was chaotic and full. The house rang with laughter and tears, with the sounds of family. Grant and Theresa worked together to manage ranch and children, supporting each other through difficult days and celebrating victories large and small. Jacob and Elizabeth had their first child the year after Sarah was born, a son they named Peter. The cousins grew up together, playing in the dirt and learning to ride almost before they could walk properly. The ranch prospered under Grant's careful management and Theresa's practical efficiency. They added more land, more cattle, more horses. When Thomas was 6 and Sarah was 4, Theresa found herself pregnant once more. This pregnancy was unexpected and challenging. She was 32 now, and her body felt the strain. Grant worried constantly, hovering over her, insisting she do nothing more strenuous than rest. But when their second daughter arrived on a bright May morning, every moment of worry melted away. They named her Lily Rose, and she had red gold hair and green eyes, looking like neither parent but beautiful beyond words. With 3 children, the house that had seemed large now felt cozy and full. Grant completed another addition, adding bedrooms for the growing family. They hired help for the house, a young woman named Mary who was wonderful with the children and gave Theresa freedom to continue working the ranch she loved. The years flowed like water, each one bringing changes and growth. Thomas showed an early aptitude for ranching, following his father everywhere, absorbing lessons about land and cattle and horses. Sarah proved to have a gift with animals, able to gentle the wildest horse with patience and kindness. Lily was the scholar, always reading, always asking questions that made her parents think. Elizabeth and Jacob had 2 more children, daughters who adored their older brother and their cousins. The 2 families lived and worked together in harmony, building something larger than either couple could have created alone. Grant's hair began to show silver at the temples. Theresa noticed laugh lines around her eyes when she looked in the mirror. They were aging together, growing into the life they had built. On their 10th anniversary, Grant gave her a necklace with 3 small stones, one for each child. She wore it every day, a reminder of their love and the family it had created. "Do you ever regret it?" He asked her that night as they lay in bed, children finally asleep, the house quiet around them. "Staying here instead of going to Louisiana, tying yourself to this hard life." "Never," she said without hesitation. "This is exactly where I am meant to be, with you, with our children on this land. This is home." He kissed her softly, a kiss that still held passion but also carried the weight of shared history, of partnership tested and proven. "I have been waiting for someone like you," he said, echoing words he had spoken years ago in a barn during a blizzard. "I did not know it then, but I know it now. I was waiting my whole life for you. And I was lost until I found you. That storm brought me home, Grant, to you, to this place, to myself." They made love slowly, quietly, mindful of children sleeping nearby but still connected by passion that had only deepened over the years. Afterward, Theresa lay in her husband's arms and counted her blessings. A good man who loved her, 3 healthy children, a sister and brother-in-law who were also dear friends, land that provided and challenged in equal measure, a life that had meaning and purpose. The children grew. Thomas at 14 was nearly as tall as his father, already taking on more responsibility around the ranch. Sarah at 12 could outride most grown men and had a way with troubled horses that bordered on magical. Lily at 8 read everything she could find and announced her intention to become a doctor, much to everyone's surprise and Grant's pride. Jacob and Elizabeth's children grew alongside them, the families so intertwined that the children referred to all four adults as aunt, uncle, mother, father interchangeably. Peter showed a talent for woodworking like his father. The twin girls, Ruth and Rebecca, were full of mischief and energy. When Theresa was 38, her courses stopped for good. She felt sadness at the ending of her childbearing years, but also relief. 3 children were plenty, and she could now pour her energy into other pursuits. She had begun keeping detailed records of the ranch's operations, her natural head for numbers proving invaluable. Under her management, the financial side of the ranch flourished. Grant relied on her more and more, openly crediting her with much of their success. In town, people spoke of the Kelleys with respect, noting the strong partnership at the heart of their prosperity. Theresa had long since shed any concern about her reputation. She had proven herself through years of hard work and dedication. No one questioned her place anymore. When Thomas turned 18, Grant officially made him a partner in the ranch. It was a proud day, marking the passage from one generation to the next. Thomas took the responsibility seriously, working even harder if that were possible, determined to honor the legacy his parents had built. Sarah declared she had no interest in marriage, preferring horses to people. Theresa worried briefly, but then decided that Sarah should live her own life. If she found happiness training horses and managing the breeding program, that was enough. Not every woman needed a husband and children to be fulfilled. Lily, true to her word, left at 16 to study medicine. It was rare for a woman but not unheard of, and Lily had the determination and intelligence to succeed. She attended a women's medical college in the East, writing home regularly with stories of her studies and adventures. Grant missed her terribly but supported her dream completely. The years continued their march. Theresa's 40th birthday came and went, then her 45th. The children were no longer children. Thomas married a rancher's daughter from Fort Stockton, a practical young woman named Catherine who fit seamlessly into the family. Sarah continued to run the horse breeding program, gaining a reputation across Texas for the quality of her animals. Lily finished her medical training and returned home, setting up practice in Fort Stockton and becoming the first female doctor most people had ever met. Grant was in his late 50s now, still strong but beginning to feel the years of hard physical labor. He and Theresa often sat on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset, talking about the day, enjoying the peaceful satisfaction of work well done and love well tended. One such evening, with the sky ablaze in gold and crimson, Grant took Theresa's hand. They had been married for 22 years, together for nearly 23. "You remember what I said to you that first night?" he asked. "After the blizzard, you said several things. Which one do you mean?" I said I had been waiting for someone like you. That I knew somehow that you were meant to be here. I remember, I thought you were mad, or I was hallucinating from the cold, he laughed, a sound she never tired of hearing. Maybe we were both a little mad, but I was right. You were meant to be here. You were meant to be mine, and I was meant to be yours. Yes, she agreed simply. We were meant to be. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. A horse whinnied from the barn. Inside the house, the lamp Mary had lit glowed warm and welcoming. This was home. This was love. This was the life they had built together from a chance meeting in a blizzard, from a moment of recognition and courage, from choosing each other every day for more than 2 decades. Thomas and Catherine gave them their first grandchild the following year, a boy they named Grant Thomas. Holding his grandson for the first time, Grant wept as he had when his own children were born. The circle continued, life flowing into life, generations building on the foundation laid by those who came before. Sarah surprised everyone by falling in love with a traveling horse trader, a weathered man 10 years her senior who matched her skill and passion. They married quietly and continued to work together, expanding the breeding program to include partnerships with ranches across 3 states. Sarah never had children, but she had horses and a husband who understood her, and that was enough. Lily practiced medicine with dedication and compassion, becoming beloved in Fort Stockton. She married one of her fellow doctors, a kind man who shared her commitment to healing. They had one daughter who showed every sign of following in her mother's footsteps. Elizabeth and Jacob's children also grew and married and had children of their own. Peter took over much of the woodworking business, creating beautiful furniture that sold across Texas. Ruth married a banker and moved to San Antonio. Rebecca became a teacher like her mother, taking over the Fort Stockton school. The ranch that Grant had built alone and Theresa had helped expand now employed dozens of people and spread across thousands of acres. It was one of the most successful operations in West Texas, known for quality cattle, excellent horses, and fair dealing. When Grant turned 60, they threw a party that brought together family, friends, neighbors, and business associates from across the state. Theresa watched her husband move through the crowd, still handsome despite gray hair and weathered skin, still commanding respect and affection. He caught her eye across the room and smiled, a smile just for her, full of love and shared memories and continued promise. That night, lying in bed in the dark, he pulled her close. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what? For staying, for choosing me, for building this life with me, for loving me all these years." She kissed him softly. "Thank you for recognizing me when I stumbled through your door half frozen and terrified. Thank you for seeing who I could be and helping me become her. Thank you for loving me exactly as I am." They made love slowly, tenderly, bodies that knew each other intimately moving together in practiced rhythm. Afterward, Theresa listened to Grant's breathing even out as he fell asleep. She lay awake a while longer, thinking about the strange path that had led her here. If the stagecoach wheel had not broken, if the blizzard had struck a day earlier or later, if she had turned south instead of north, if Grant had not been home, if she had gone to Louisiana as planned, so many small chances that had come together to create this life. But she did not believe in chance anymore. She believed in fate and choice working together. The blizzard had been fate, staying had been choice. Everything that followed had been both, fate providing opportunities, choice determining which to embrace. She had chosen wisely. They both had. And the life they had built together was proof that love, real love, was worth any risk, any challenge, any leap of faith required. Theresa fell asleep in her husband's arms, in their bed, in their house, on their land, surrounded by the family they had created, grateful for every moment of the journey that had brought her home. The years rolled on with the steady rhythm of seasons. Spring brought new calves and fresh grass. Summer meant long days of hard work under brutal sun. Fall offered relief from heat and preparation for winter. Winter brought cold and rest and renewal. The cycle repeated, predictable and comforting. Theresa was 50 when Grant fell from his horse. It was a freak accident, something that should never have happened to a rider as experienced as he was. But the horse spooked at a rattlesnake. Grant was thrown, and he landed badly. He broke his hip and several ribs, and the doctor worried about internal injuries. For weeks, Theresa nursed him with fierce determination. She refused to consider the possibility of losing him, working tirelessly to aid his recovery. Grant chafed at the forced inactivity but submitted to her care, recognizing her need to do something, anything, to help. He recovered slowly but completely, though he walked with a slight limp afterward. The accident sobered them both, a reminder of mortality and the preciousness of time. They became even more intentional about cherishing moments together, about saying, "I love you" frequently, about never letting disagreements fester. "We are not young anymore," Grant said one evening as they sat on the porch, a ritual they maintained in all but the coldest weather. "We need to start thinking about the future, about what happens to the ranch when we are gone." They spent months working with lawyers, setting up trusts and partnerships that would ensure the ranch's survival. Thomas would inherit the largest share, as the one who had dedicated his life to the land. But all the children received portions, and provisions were made for grandchildren and future generations. "This is our legacy," Theresa said as they signed the final documents. "Not just the land, but what it represents. Family working together, hard work rewarded, love enduring." The ranch continued to prosper under shared management. Thomas handled day-to-day operations with Catherine's help. Sarah managed the horse program. Even Lily contributed, providing medical care for both people and animals. It was truly a family enterprise now, stronger for the many hands that tended it. Grant and Theresa gradually stepped back from active management, focusing instead on guidance and grandchildren. They had 9 grandchildren by the time Theresa turned 55, with more on the way. The house was rarely quiet, always full of children's laughter and questions and energy. "We built this," Grant said one Christmas as they watched their extended family gather around the table for dinner. 3 generations sat together, sharing food and stories and love. "We took a chance in a blizzard and we built all of this." "Best decision I ever made," Theresa replied, squeezing his hand. "Staying here, choosing you, I would do it again in a heartbeat." When Theresa was 60, Elizabeth died peacefully in her sleep. The loss hit hard, stealing away Theresa's sister and best friend. Jacob was devastated and the whole family mourned. But they also celebrated Elizabeth's life, remembering her laughter and wisdom and the love she had brought to all of them. "She chose adventure," Theresa said at the funeral, her voice strong despite tears. "She chose love. She chose to build a life here with all of us, and we are better for it. I will miss her every day, but I am grateful for every moment we had." Jacob never remarried. He said he had found his soulmate and needed no other. He lived another 10 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren, before joining Elizabeth in the small cemetery outside Fort Stockton. The losses reminded Theresa and Grant to treasure each day. They were in their 60s now, both showing the effects of long, hard lives. Grant's limp was more pronounced. Theresa's hands ached with arthritis. But they were together, still partners, still in love. On their 40th anniversary, Thomas arranged a surprise party. The entire family gathered, along with what seemed like half of Fort Stockton. People came from across Texas to honor the couple who had built an empire on love and hard work. Grant stood to speak, his voice still strong despite his years. 40 years ago, a blizzard brought the most precious gift of my life to my door. I said to her then that I had been waiting for someone like her. I did not know how true those words were. Theresa, you have been my partner, my love, my best friend, my everything. You have given me children and grandchildren, a legacy beyond anything I could have built alone. You have made every day of the past 40 years worth living. I love you more now than I did on our wedding day, and I will love you until I draw my last breath and beyond." Theresa could not speak through her tears. She simply stood and kissed her husband while the crowd cheered and applauded. These were their people, the community they had helped build, the family they had created. This was the life she had chosen when she stayed at a remote ranch instead of continuing to Louisiana. This was the reward for courage and faith and love. They danced that night, moving slowly to music played by local musicians. Grant held her close, and despite aching joints and aged bodies, they felt young again, lost in the memory of who they had been and the reality of who they had become. 40 more years, Grant whispered in her ear. "That is what I want, 40 more years with you," she laughed through tears. "We will be over 100 years old. Then we will be over 100 together. I am not ready to let you go. I will never be ready. Then we will stay as long as we can. We will love each other for every moment we have left." They did have years left, though not 40. Grant died when he was 74, Theresa 71. It was peaceful in his sleep with his wife beside him. He simply did not wake up one morning. The doctor said his heart had given out, worn down by decades of hard work and full living. Theresa grieved deeply but not desperately. They had loved well and long. They had built a legacy that would outlast them both. Grant had given her everything he promised and more. She could not regret a love that had blessed her so completely. She lived 5 more years, staying active in ranch management, watching grandchildren grow and great-grandchildren arrive. Thomas and Catherine took wonderful care of her, ensuring she wanted for nothing. Sarah visited frequently, bringing horses to show off and stories to share. Lily checked on her health weekly, making sure she was comfortable and pain-free. On a warm spring evening when she was 76, Theresa asked to be taken to the spot where Grant had first told her he loved her. Thomas and Catherine helped her to the small rise overlooking the ranch. She stood there as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and looked out over the land she had helped build. The ranch sprawled as far as she could see, testament to decades of hard work and wise management. Cattle grazed peacefully. Horses ran in distant pastures. The house, expanded multiple times, stood solid and welcoming. Smoke rose from several chimneys, marking homes where family lived and loved. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "We built something beautiful." That night, Theresa went to sleep in the bed she had shared with Grant for over 40 years. She dreamed of a blizzard and a tall man with kind eyes who had promised her everything and delivered on every word. She dreamed of children and grandchildren, of love and laughter, of a life fully lived. She did not wake up. Like her husband, she slipped away peacefully, her heart simply deciding it was time to rest. They buried her beside Grant in the small cemetery under a shared headstone that read, "Grant and Theresa Kelley, partners in life and love, together always." The ranch continued, passed down through the generations they had created. Thomas ran it until his own son was ready, then that son passed it to his daughter, and on through the years. The name changed slightly with marriages and time, but the core remained. A family working together on land they loved, built on a foundation of courage and faith, and a love story that began in a blizzard. And sometimes, on cold winter nights when snow fell across West Texas, ranch hands swore they could see 2 figures standing on the rise overlooking the property, holding hands and looking out over their legacy, still together, still in love, still home. The end of Grant and Theresa's story was not an ending at all. It was a beginning that continued through the lives they had touched, the family they had built, the land they had tended. They had found each other against impossible odds, had chosen love over fear, had built something lasting and beautiful. Their story lived on in every calf born on Kelley land, in every horse trained with Sarah's methods, in every patient Lily healed, in every piece of furniture Peter crafted, in every child taught by Rebecca, in every deal made with the honest integrity Grant had modeled. The blizzard that brought Theresa to Grant's door had been fate. Everything that followed had been choice, commitment, and love. They had been waiting for each other, though neither knew it until the moment arrived. And when it did, they had the courage to recognize it and the wisdom to nurture it into something extraordinary. That was the true legacy of Grant and Theresa Kelley. Not the acres or the cattle or the wealth, but the proof that love, real love, built on partnership and respect and genuine affection, could weather any storm, overcome any obstacle, and create miracles that lasted long after the lovers themselves had passed into memory and legend. Their great-great-grandchildren would tell the story of the blizzard, and the widow and the cowboy who said, "I have been waiting for someone like you." They would tell it on winter nights when the wind howled, reminding each new generation that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the courage to stay instead of leave, to trust instead of doubt, to love instead of fear. And that story, like the love that inspired it, would never truly end.